SunnahFollowers presents a new Hadith class taught by Ustadha Laila Nasheeba, Riyadhus Saliheen, every Monday and Wednesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. Streaming on all major platforms. Channel SunnahFollowers.
Rasulullah. I'd like to welcome everybody to our new series. This is a new class. Well, it's not new for me. I've taught this class about 10 times over the past 20 years. But one of the new Shahada a group of the new Shahadas asked me during Ramadan, remember, for the Q&A, if I would teach the Riyadhus Saliheen Hadith. Because they say that, everybody teaches. This is one of the few classes that you will get in the mosques. They teach about, the Riyadhus Saliheen Hadiths, which are hadiths compiled by Imam Nawawi. And Imam Nawawi has his commentary. So that's why a lot of the imams do teach this in the mosques. These hadith books, these hadiths in this book, because of Imam Nawawi's commentary. But some of the brothers had approached me during Ramadan, the new Shahadas, and asked if I would teach it because they like the way I don't rely on anyone's commentary. I usually give y'all the meaning and the history from the Sunnah. And so I agreed, because I do, for my students here, I need to resume the Hadith classes with them so they can continue to memorize the meaning of these hadiths. And also, this is a good book to use with the new Shahadas. And I do encourage you to purchase Imam Nawawi's Riyadhus Saliheen, The Righteous Garden, because the hadiths, some of the hadiths are not authentic. I'm here to let you guys know, not all the hadiths in that book are authentic either. There are some hadiths that are questionable, but I'll let you know which ones are if we come upon them. And when I teach this class, I don't rely on Imam Nawawi's commentary. In fact, I don't use his commentary at all. I give you the meaning, from, based on the history of Islam as I've been taught it or whatnot. Okay. And like I said, I've taught this class in the past. So this class will be under the playlist entitled Riyadhus Saliheen 2025. Because if you look at the playlist, you will find my old lectures of Riyadhus Saliheen, because I've taught this so many times. But this is 2025. So it'll be the playlist Riyadhus Saliheen 2025. And it's going to probably take us a year and a half. I usually, when I teach this, because I go through all his books, the whole entire series, it usually takes me about a year and a half. Okay, and like I said, I'll let you know which hadiths are questionable and which are not. All right, so the book can be found online, and you can get the ebook online anywhere. Just Google it, or you can buy, and I'm going to add it to my the videos, the lectures I put out. You will see the product come up. I'll try to have the whole series, which is $130-something. I'll try to have that attached to the videos, so that way you can click the link and purchase the entire collection, if you would like, of Riyadhus Saliheen. Okay, but the online book is just as good. And tonight we're going to cover the first chapter and of the online book, which addresses sincerity. And let me put the PowerPoint up on the screen. There will be quizzes. Since this is a hadith class, I will give you quizzes. So the next time we meet for this class, this is every Monday and Wednesday, I will quiz you on the hadiths that we discussed tonight before we move on to the next ones. So let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen for tonight's lecture. Okay. And for my students, y'all need to memorize the meaning of these hadiths. Don't be sitting here listening to me talk, trying to see what's funny that Layla got to say, because I know I'm a jokester. But I don't joke when it comes to these hadiths. Y'all better be paying attention so you can pass the quiz, and I give it to you today after tomorrow. And by the way, this is how the collection look. Riyadhus Saliheen is a collection of books that he put together. There's volume 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And we're going to try to go over the whole volumes, which I say is going to take about a year and a half. When I taught it last time, that's how long it took. All right. And I will put the link where you can purchase the whole set. And I will attach that to the video when I get through teaching tonight. And I'll also put it in the edited version on the playlist. So tonight we're going to be covering the first chapter of the first volume, which speaks about sincerity and significance of intentions, and how all actions, apparent and hidden, are based on our intentions. Simple hadiths that I've discussed with you guys before in previous classes. You all should be aware of these hadiths, but let's put it up here on the screen so everyone can see. First of all, one of the things that makes Imam Nawawi's books so this series so great is he really took the time to pick hadiths that address our faith, that address our iman. And also remember in my Hasidic Tafsir class, remember we spoke about how the hadiths are the explanation of the Quran. And we talked about the system that is used, that the Quran Tafsir interpreter uses, how every chapter of the Quran has a topic, and all the sentences in each chapter relate to that topic and have an objective, and how we use the science of connectivity, how the hadiths connect to those verses and help explain them. Well, this is a great example. I'm going to show you the science of connectivity, how the hadiths explain the Quran, which is why just because a person can teach you Arabic, just because a person can teach you the Quran doesn't make them a scholar. Because as the Prophet said, anybody can learn Arabic. Arabic is easy on the tongue. That's why Allah revealed this knowledge in that language. Okay, and also anybody can memorize. Memorization is easy. But as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it's understanding what you're saying that's hard. And you will never understand the Quran, no matter how well you can recite Arabic. You will never understand the Quran until you learn them hadiths. That's a fact. Well, I'm going to show you the science of connectivity. Let's take a look at a couple of verses of the Quran. Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning, and they were commanded to not worship anyone but Allah, and to stay away from associating partners with him, and to perform the prayer and to give in charity, because that is the right religion. This is the right religion. Also, in another verse, Allah says, it is neither their meat nor their blood that reaches Allah. Instead, it is your piety that reaches him. And finally, in another verse, Allah says, say, O Muhammad, in other words, tell them, O Prophet of Allah, whether you hide what's in your chest or reveal it, Allah knows everything. Now, you read these verses of the Quran, all of these verses, the Quran, first of all, the Quran is not the creation of Allah. And I have a lot of people here who follow the Ash'ari view and Sufi views. They also believe that the Quran is a creation of Allah. It is not a creation of Allah. The Quran are the words of Allah. And when Allah was speaking, except for several other verses are an exception. But for everything that Allah said, he said it for a reason. Something happened. So something happened to cause Allah to say, you are commanded to worship no one but him. Something happened that caused Allah to say, it is not the blood or the meat that reaches Allah, it's your piety. Something happened to cause Allah to tell the prophet, to tell the people, whether you have what's in your heart or not, Allah knows it. So you're not going to find out what happened to cause Allah to say these things unless you know the history. You know the hadiths. The hadiths are the history. So this is now the following hadiths that we're going to go over tonight. They all connect to this. They all give you the story as to what happened that caused Allah to say these things. So let's take a look at those hadiths. Okay. We have the first hadith here where Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, tells us that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, your actions and deeds are considered by their intentions. A person will receive the reward according to his or her intention. So if a person migrates for the sake of Allah to earn the love and pleasure of Allah and to earn the love and pleasure of me, the Prophet, then your migration will be for Allah and for his Prophet. But for those who migrate to a different land for worldly benefits or to marry a woman, your migration is for that. You'll be rewarded with the woman. You'll be rewarded with whatever the worldly benefit is, but it won't be rewarded by Allah. So this is what happened that caused Allah to say these things. What happened was when Allah sent down the command to the Muslims in Mecca, telling them that it was no longer lawful for them to stay in Mecca because the Quraysh were persecuting the Muslims. The Muslims were not allowed. They were not able to practice their religion openly. They weren't allowed to pray. They weren't allowed to fulfill their obligations. So Allah sent down a command telling the Prophet Muhammad to tell the Muslims to migrate to Abyssinia or to migrate to Medina, which are Abyssinian. Abyssinia was a non-Muslim country, but the Christian king there had no problems with them coming there to practice their religion. Medina was a non-Islamic state too, inhabited by the Jews and the Arabs and controlled by the Jews. But the Jews had no problem with the Muslims coming there to practice their religion either. So the Prophet told the companions in Mecca, it's no longer lawful for us to live here. Our fire cannot be near. That's another hadith. The hadith in Bukhari that says the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, make sure that your fires are not close to the Kafir. This is when he said that we can't live amongst them here in Mecca because they don't accept us. They're persecuting us. We have to distance our fires, distance our lives away from them. So that's what that hadith means. So that's when the Prophet said, we have to leave. We have to leave. And there was one man. He said, okay, we'll leave, O Prophet of Allah. But the Prophet didn't know that this man, he wanted to leave not just so he could practice the religion. He also knew a woman there whose name was Qais. He wanted to marry her. She lived in Medina. So this companion was like, wow, okay, I'll move. I can now be married a woman I want to marry. So he sent word to her, telling her that he was going to be migrating to Medina because Allah said the Muslims couldn't live in Mecca no more, and he wanted to marry her. But when she heard that that was the reason he was coming, just to marry her and not so much just because, you know, to practice the religion, she refused him. She said, oh, I don't want to marry you. She said, if you want to marry, you should come to Medina because you want to be a Muslim and practice the deen. You shouldn't come here because you thinking that's going to make it easy for you to marry me. Okay? And that's when the prophet heard what happened. That's when the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made this statement. He said, well, remember, guys, anything Allah tells us, anything. This is a beautiful hadith qudsi. And I want you women who cover your faces. You say that the reason you cover your face is to please your husband. Well, guess what? It's not accepted. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he heard this, this is when he made this statement about the deeds. And he also said, Allah said that he is not in need of any deed that is done for his sake and the sake of someone else. So anyone who does something to please Allah and someone else, Allah doesn't accept it. That's why I tell you women, if you covering your face to please your husband, you ain't doing it for Allah. You get the reward of pleasing your husband, but you ain't getting no blessings from Allah because it's not something that Allah made obligatory or even told us that we have to do. Plus, you ain't doing it for him. You're doing it because your husband doesn't want nobody else to look at you. So your husband may be pleased with you, but Allah is not in need of that. Okay, so that's why all those hadiths were revealed. And this man, who when everybody heard that he was moving for that woman, that's when this man earned the nickname of Muhajir Qais. You know, the immigrant, the one who was migrating for Qais. So this hadith is so important, guys. It lets us know that anything we do to migrate, to give in charity, to make our salats, to wear our clothing. Why do I dress the way I dress? Am I dressing this way to please my mother, to please my father, to please my husband, to please my children? No, I dress this way to please Allah because Allah commanded me to cover my body. So everything we do, guys, we either do it for Allah or it's not accepted. And Allah will reward us based on that. If you're doing it for your husband, yes, Allah will cause your husband to love you, inshallah. But it ain't giving you no brownies with Allah. Y'all understand that? Also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke about how an army will one day raid the Kaaba. And when it reaches a deserted land, all the people will be swallowed up by the earth, meaning there'll be an earthquake. And the Prophet told this to his wife Aisha. And she said, "O Prophet of Allah, why will Allah cause the earth to swallow up all the people?" He said the earth will swallow them all because they were all a part of it. But they will be raised up and judged according to their intentions. Some of them will raid the Kaaba not because they want to, but because they were forced to do it by their leader, by their ruler. For those who did it because they were forced, Allah will judge them accordingly. But those who did it because they wanted to, they will be judged and punished accordingly. So again, this is another hadith that shows us that our intentions matter. We will get whatever whatever our intentions are on an issue. So that's why, like I was telling you guys during Ramadan, remember during the month of Ramadan, we went through the steps of purifying our heart to make sure that everything we do is for Allah. You want to keep that going even after Ramadan. And that's why we talked about how a person should hold himself or hold herself accountable before we do a deed and afterwards. In other words, think about what you're getting ready to do and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I teaching because I want Allah to be pleased with me? Or am I doing it because I want to be famous? Am I doing it because I want to be rich? Am I doing it because I want a man to love me? I don't know. People come up with all kinds of reasons. Okay? Hold yourself accountable before you do an action. And then after you do the action, hold yourself accountable and make sure you did it the way Allah commanded. So after every time I do a class, before I do my lectures, when I'm doing my PowerPoint, I hold myself accountable and review why am I doing this, to make sure that my intentions are solely for Allah. And then at the end of every night, when I make the videos, I make sure that everything I did the way Allah legislated. I make sure that I explain the hadiths the way the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained them. I make sure that I didn't violate any of Allah's laws, his rules or guidelines in dealing with the people and all of that. If we would hold ourselves accountable before we do a deed and after, then that will assure that our deed gets accepted. Powerful hadith. So a lot of people, when they read that hadith about the migration, about the man who wanted to migrate to marry a woman, a lot of people ask the question, Sister Laila, so will I get a lot of rewards if I leave America, for example? If I immigrate, if I migrate from America to Saudi Arabia because I want to get, to please Allah, okay, will I get rewarded because America is a non-Muslim country? If I leave the UK, if I leave Australia and move to a Muslim country, is this more rewarding? Well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is no migration after the conquest of Mecca. Instead, they're striving and fighting in the way of Allah with good intentions. This will continue. So if you are summoned to go fight in the way of Allah, do so. But there is no more migration. What does this statement mean? Well, after Islam had spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula, Arabia became the first Islamic country in the world. That's when the Prophet told the companions, no longer are we oppressed and persecuted from practicing our religion. So now we can live anywhere in Arabia. So there is no more migrating for the sake of Allah just to practice your deen. Instead, there's only fighting and doing good deeds in the way of Allah. Does everybody understand that? For example, we live here in America. We're in America. America is just like Abyssinia was. We're not being prosecuted yet for practicing our religion. You're allowed to pray openly. You're allowed to dress as a Muslim woman, a Muslim man openly. We're allowed to fulfill all of our religious obligations. So there's no need to migrate to no Islamic land because I can do my Islamic rituals right here. But instead, there will always be our good intentions. Are you praying sincerely to earn the love of Allah, or are you doing it to show off? Am I dressing the way I do because I want to make an impression on Allah, or am I dressing this way because I'm trying to make a fashion statement? So intention here refers to the goodness, the sincerity of wanting Allah to accept your deed because you're doing it solely for him. This will exist until the end of time. Does everybody understand that? So I don't have to go and move to Saudi Arabia. I don't have to move to Kuwait. I don't have to move anywhere. I can live anywhere on this earth right now, as long as I'm able to practice my religion. But because people sin in Saudi Arabia too, They do drugs in Saudi Arabia too. They fornicate in Saudi Arabia too. They have homosexuality in Saudi Arabia too. There's women on the beach naked in Saudi Arabia too. The world is a fitan. The fitan is everywhere. But as long as I'm able to practice my religion without being persecuted, this is fine. So that puts to rest those fanatical brothers out there who tell you it's haram to live in America. It's haram to live in Australia. It's haram to live in Europe. Every Muslim needs to be living in Saudi Arabia. Who said that? That's not what Allah said. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ said. It's not necessary for us to migrate from our country as long as we are able to adhere to our Islamic injunctions. I hope that's clear. So when y'all come upon these Facebook Muslims that talk all that kalam about migrating, y'all better walk away from them. Those are the extreme fanatics. Because as the Prophet said, there is no immigration now since Islam has spread. Okay? But instead we have the striving with our good deeds to earn Allah's pleasure. Y'all understand these hadiths? All right? Also, we have this hadith where Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he said, we accompanied the Prophet ﷺ on an expedition. And he said, there are some men in Medina who are with you whenever you leave and whichever valley that you cross. They were not able to join you in person because of their sickness, but they're still with you. Why? Because of their intention. And he was talking about the blind man who couldn't see, or there's somebody sick with the flu. They wanted to participate. They wanted to go out with the Muslims and fight in the way of Allah, but they were too old or too sick. Allah gave them the reward. That's what the Prophet is saying. Even though they were unable to participate, the simple fact that they wanted to, and Allah knew that if they were able to, they would have, they got the reward. That's why I tell you, women, you sisters have got to stop. You elderly women have got to stop falling victim to shaitan about making Hajj. In order to perform Hajj, there are certain criteria that you have to meet. Number one, you have to be able to afford it. And Hajj is not cheap. Hajj is for the rich, not the poor. Most of you don't meet that criteria. Most of you ain't got no $10,000. Number two, if you are a woman, you cannot make Hajj without a mahram. That's the second condition. That's the second pillar. For a woman, you have to have a mahram. So since you don't have the mahram, you don't qualify for Hajj. And what does that mean? That means Allah is not holding you accountable for that. But the simple fact that Allah knows that if you did have the money, if you did have the mahram, you would have made it. That's why he's not holding it against you. Should you die today, Allah's not throwing you in hell because you didn't make Hajj. He knows that had you met the criteria, you would have done so. And he's not going to hold it against you, whether your children make it up for you or not. Allah doesn't hold it against you. And I tell you, sisters, this all the time. But like we talked about in our 6:30 class, faith goes up and down. Some of us become so fanatic and we allow our jinn, our personal jinn, and the allies of shaitan to take us away from Allah and make you make Hajj with a group. And guess what? Your Hajj probably wasn't accepted because the Prophet Muhammad said, Allah, if you want your Hajj to be accepted, your Ramadan to be accepted, your prayers to be accepted, You cannot intentionally, deliberately be in disobeying Allah. So all you women who are making Hajj without a mahram, your Hajj, 9 times out of 10, your Hajj is not accepted because you disobeyed Allah knowingly and intentionally. You didn't have to make Hajj. It wasn't an obligation upon you because you didn't meet the criteria, and Allah had rewarded you based on your intentions anyway. But you women chose to fall victim to Shaitan and his aliyah, and you did an action of worship, knowingly doing it wrong. And so 9 times out of 10, your Hajj was not accepted. Allah knows best, but most likely it was not, because he doesn't accept nothing unless it's good. And he doesn't accept any actions. The Prophet said Allah doesn't accept any of your good deeds if you are intentionally disobeying him. I tell you sisters this every year, and y'all still get up and do it anyway. So this hadith here, when the Prophet was telling those companions, the brothers who were unable to come and participate because they were sick, they're with you in spirit. The same for you sisters, you older women that don't have the mahram. Even though you're not able to make Hajj each year, you're with the Hajis in spirit, because Allah knows that if you were able to, you would have been there. See how merciful our Lord is. But we allow Shaitan to win over us. Now do y'all see why there'll be more people in hell than paradise? Because most of us follow Shaitan. We reject the people of knowledge. We pull ourselves away from the people of truth, and we choose to hang out with the sweet, nice nobodies. And when we end up in hell, you'll be pointing a finger at that nobody who led you there, and they're going to tell you, I didn't make you do it. You chose to listen to me instead of listening to Laila. And Laila giving you the hadiths, and she's bona fide and qualified, and she's learned from real scholars, and I'm just a nobody. All right? Blame yourself, people. You sisters, stop with this Hajj. If you don't have the mahram, you don't qualify. Okay. Also, we have this hadith, which also shows the reward of intentions. Yazid ibn Akhnas, he was a companion too. He said, my father had one day set aside some money for charity, and he gave it to a man in the mosque. So I went to that man and I took the money back. And the man said, I had not intended for you to be given. So we went to the Prophet and told him about it. And the Prophet said to my father, Yazid, you have been rewarded for what you intended. And he said to me, you are entitled to what you have taken. Let me explain what happened here. It happens to a lot of us. How many of us need money? We're going through a rough time. You ain't got enough money to pay your rent. You need food. You need your bills paid. But your mother, your father, your brothers, you know, they giving money to other people. Well, that's what happened here. When this man heard that his father had gave some money to the mosque for charity, he went and said, no, I want that money back because I need it. I need it. I need help. I need to get my rent paid. My mother giving you $500. That $500 she could have gave to me so I could pay my $2,000 rent. I'm giving y'all a scenario. So the man at the mosque said, I'm not giving it back to you. And Yazid, his father said, I don't want you to have that $500. I want the mosque to have it. So they appealed to the Prophet, and the Prophet told Yazid, you wanted to give the money to the mosque as charity. That was your intention. Your intention was to do a good deed for the sake of Allah. Guess what, Yazid? Allah will reward you for that. And for his son, he said, take the money because charity begins at home. His father didn't know that his son was in that dire of a state. So again, this is another hadith that shows that our intentions are everything. Yazid wanted to give money to the mosque for the sake of Allah, so the mosque can pay its bills and all of that, not knowing that his son was in great need. So even though the mosque gives the money to the son because he's most entitled to it, because charity begins at home, Yazid will still get the reward based on his intentions. So I hope this hadith is clear. This hadith lets us know that if charity goes to a needy son of a Muslim, there is no need to take it back for him, because again, save your soul and your family from the hellfire first. And the father will get the reward, for what he intended. And also you learn from this hadith too, that it is permissible to appoint somebody to be your attorney or your agent over your money. And we also learn that if a child feels that his parents are not giving them what they are justly due, the child can appeal it like this son did. Well, the father didn't really know that the son was all that bad off. But we know that if you hear or find out that your parents done put $1,000 to the mosque and you need some food, you can appeal that. You can go and say, hey, I'm her daughter. I need some money to help pay my bills. So a lot of this stuff, you learn a lot about the hadiths, guys. The hadiths are the explanation of the Quran. They're also the examples of the prophet that he left behind for us. Like I told you guys, there is nothing that we encounter in this world today that those original companions have not already encountered. The problem is we Muslims don't learn our religion correctly. The Sunnah, the hadiths are becoming an abandoned thing here. We're too busy learning from Sheikh Come a Dime a Dozens on the internet. Okay, we're too busy trying to learn how to speak Arabic when we need to be learning how to understand what your obligations are as a Muslim. Okay. Also, we have this hadith here. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard that Sa'd ibn Abu Waqqas was sick, and he went to visit him. This is the last year of the Prophet's life. He went to visit his companion, and he found the companion laying in his bed sick. And the companion said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, you can see the pain I'm suffering, and I got some money." He said, "But I think I might end up dying." He said, "All I have is one daughter." He said, "Should I give her 2/3 of my property, or should I give my property in charity?" The Prophet ended up telling him to give it to his daughter, because again, your children are most deserving of your charity. Charity begins at home. Your family is most deserving. You don't want to leave your daughter begging on the streets. So he told him you could gift 1/3, and this is for all Muslims. We can gift up to 1/3 of our estate, up to 1/3 to whatever or whoever we want, but the rest should go to our family, so that our family don't end up begging and dying, of not having any money. So that's where we tell you guys that if you're making your will, you can leave 1/3, you can gift 1/3 to whoever or whatever you want. But the rest, it should go to your children. In fact, the Prophet told him even 1/3 is too much. And guess what? You'll still get the reward. You will still get the reward because Allah knows that, you know, you wanted to leave half of it or the majority of your money in the way of Allah. But the children and your relatives come first. So you'll get the reward of obeying Allah when it comes to your will. And also you'll get the reward because Allah knew that your intentions were. If you could have gave it to the mosque for his sake, you would have. So that's where we get the 1/3 from, based on this authentic hadith. But remember, everything begins at home, including charity. Okay? So these are the hadiths, the first set of hadiths I want to go over. And this is why the brothers